Move on to question 7. Call on the Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown, Malew, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Minister for the Cabinet Office when CPI and RPI data for the period July 2020 to April 2021 were A, issued and B, reissued, and what factors led to the reissue and how the adjustments were publicised. Thank you.
Minister for the Cabinet Office to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. In answer to Part A, CPI and RPI data are issued on a monthly basis. Turning to Part B, the data for July 2020 to April 2021 was reissued in the June 2021 inflation report published in July 2021. The data was revised due to an error in an item in one subcategory relating to the pricing of e-books. The historic error occurred only once, but resulted in inaccuracies in the previously stated rates of inflation dating back to July 2020. Mr President, in line with the published Code of Practice for Statistics, once an error is identified, the corrections are rectified as soon as possible. The revisions were published in a press release that accompanied the publication of the revised data in July 2021, explaining the cause and impact of the error that had occurred. Thank you, Mr President.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse first.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister. In terms of the one component parts causing a significant change, could we just go back to the actual facts? So, did the Minister say it was e-books? So in terms of that, how come we got such a huge change in the monthly statement for over the whole period? There wasn't a consistent change, and it was quite a significant change in many respects. We were actually looking at an 84% change and various things, and it looks odd that such a small individual component of the total inflation measure can make such a massive impact over such a long period of time. Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. I did query myself directly with officers and received a response this morning. The e-books category was out by a factor of approximately 10, so talking about a significant increase in the region of about 1,000%. It's had a knock-on effect of bumping overall inflation up by 0.3 or 0.4% in most cases. So the nature of the error, which I think is what the member is interested in, is that there was a bracket missed off a formula, Mr President. So as soon as it was identified, it was corrected, and the news release was put out there correcting the report. And so the formula intended to calculate an average was incorrect. Thank you, Mr President.
Supplementary order.
Has the Cabinet Office, the Treasury perhaps, looked at the impact of the error of the CPI data following through? I'm particularly concerned perhaps in that the September CPI level is used as the basis for the operating order for the 2021 budget, and therefore things such as pensions and benefits may have been operated by the wrong amount based on policy considerations of the past. So could the Minister firstly assure us that that will be corrected, and if that is the case also what the gain or loss to government will be by virtue of these having to be reissued would be?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. This has been checked with officers as to the impact, and the data used going forward will be with the corrected rates of inflation that have already been put out in the corrected reports. So officers in the Treasury have advised that the correction to the figures does not actually make any difference to pensions and other areas, and have provided this information to be precise. Uprating of state pensions in the island follows the UK's uprating policy, which since 2010 has been subject to triple lock guarantee. Secondly, most of the benefits which are not paid out of general revenue linked to the UK rate of inflation. And thirdly, benefits which are paid out of general revenue generally do follow the Manx rate of inflation. However, as the original September 2020 Isle of Man CPI was negative, generally speaking, the rate of these benefits were not increased from April 2021. The fact that the corrected figure is also negative would not cause Treasury to revisit this, and that's the information that I have. Also, I can also advise that people will be interested in what's been done to prevent such or similar errors from occurring in the future, to keep in line with what is appropriate if there is an error in such data, the appropriate standards. is that that it should be corrected as soon as possible. That was done, and it was also published. And in the short term, increased checks on data and calculations have been instituted to limit the possibility of errors occurring. And in the longer term, this division within Cabinet Office intends this year to conduct a full review of procedures and methodology employed in calculating rates of inflation, ideally in partnership with an external organisation such as the United Kingdom's Office of National Statistics. Thank you, Mr. President.
Supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulate the Minister on taking the view that it would be good from time to time to look at all of the statistical calculations and to involve external bodies. Does the Minister want to agree with me that some of those people in the island who do follow CPI professionally, pensions people, actually had discussed this at length with the Economic Affairs Office, and in fact a second explanation was issued to those people back in September dealing with this very point? And does the Minister want to accept congratulations, at least, in dealing properly with this unfortunate error earlier in the year, which ultimately goes back to changes that were made to do with air travel, I believe, at the beginning of the pandemic?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will just take on board the Honourable Member's comments and perspective on that. Obviously, this is something before my time, so I've had to ask some questions myself as to what the situation is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Final supplementary, Mr. Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. In June 2021, the headline figures was adapted quite radically. But will the full updated reports be issued in terms of that period so we can actually see what the components were showing? And in addition to that, the adjustment means that for a significant proportion of that period, the economy was suffering from deflation. Did the department make any new recommendations to Enterprise and Comin about the additional support business might require? Because we've been in quite a different economic situation than many had assumed at the time. Has any consideration been taken into account of that change? Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. That correction has already been made and publicised, and there was not felt any need to address the other point that the Honourable Member has suggested. Thank you, Mr. President.